Clark here at Killer Fun, back with another daily Killer Sudoku solve video. This is puzzle number 1378 at dailykillersudoku.com. Let's look at the puzzle and see what we can learn before we start the solve. This is a difficulty 4 standard Killer Sudoku puzzle with an average solve time of 43 minutes. The board is symmetric left to right across a vertical axis, so if you find an action in one part of the board, there might be a similar possibility symmetrically across the board. There are not many good starting points using limited combinations or easy single-cell rule of 45 setups. Once we do get started, much of the progression relies on more complex rule of 45 scenarios with multi-cell innies or outies and combinations of both. I only noted one crux in my solve path, which I will mention and list in the video description, but these are in the eye of the beholder. I felt that this particular one was extremely complex. With any of these cruxes, if it stands out easily to you, you may wonder why I call it a crux. But it may have taken me a while to sort it out, and vice versa. If you have sticky spots, let me know in the comments. While this is listed as a difficulty 4 puzzle on Daily Killer Sudoku, my re-rank algorithm has it listed as a difficulty 10. With the average solve time of 43 minutes and an abandonment ratio of 71%, this is solidly in the lower third of the 8601 difficulty 10 puzzles cohort and ranked 25,402 of 30,661 puzzles at the time of this recording. Difficulty ratings are suspect and subjective at all times, and my algorithm is quite simple, so take this re-ranking for what it is worth. That being said, I did enter the puzzle into the Killer Solver at sudokuwiki.com, which has a grader feature. Puzzle 1378 received a rating of 10.2 extreme grade. So that makes me feel a bit better about claiming a higher difficulty than a 4, even though I don't have a good translator between Daily Killer Sudoku difficulties and Sudoku Wiki ratings. If you would like to follow along or give it a try first, I have put a link to play this puzzle in the description. Let's get solving. Let's get started with puzzle 1378. We'll start up here in box 2. This 2-cell 17 cage is about the only gimme in this whole puzzle. There's only one possible combination, and that is an 8-9. The next step is over here in box 1. There are 2 6 cages. We know that a 6 cage has 2 possible combinations of 1-5 and 2-4. With 2 in the same box, we can enter both combinations into each box for a 4-cell quadruple of 1, 2, 4, 5. Continuing in box 1 with this 10 cage, since there is a 1, 2, 4 quadruple in the 2 6 cages, the 10 cage has only one possible combination, and that is a 3-7. Let's fill in the remaining cells in box 1, and the remaining candidates are 6, 8, and 9. Now in box 4, row 4, column 1, the 19 cage, the candidates for this remaining cell of the 19 cage can be determined in at least 2 ways. First, there are 3 combinations that have a 6, 8, and 9 in them. There's this 2, 8, 9. 3, 7, 9 is not a possibility. There's this 4, 6, 9. The 4, 7, 8 is not a possibility. And this 5, 6, 8. So this can be a 2, 4, or 5. The other method is to use the rule of 45 in box 1 and highlight all of the cages that are mostly in box 1. This is a 1 in, 1 out. The combined sum of the highlighted cages is 41, meaning that the candidates here are going to be 4 greater than the candidates here, which is the case. This 2 plus 4 is 6. This 4 plus 4 is 8. This 5 plus 4 is 9. So we've set all of the possibilities, or limited them at least, for box 1. We have another rule of 45 symmetric across the board in box 3. Let's take a look at that. The combined sum of the highlighted cages in box 3 with a 1 in, 1 out rule of 45 is 40. What that means is the candidates here are going to be 5 greater than the candidates here on this outie. So if we start with 1, 5 greater than 1 is 6. We put a 2 here, 5 greater than 2 is 7. 3, 5 greater than that is 8. And we put a 4 here, and 5 greater than that is 9. If we put a 5 here, we would exceed the standard digits for Sudoku. And if we put a 5 here, this would need to be a 0, also outside of the standard digits for Sudoku. The next step in the puzzle is a 3-row rule of 45 possibility. In the top band of the puzzle, it is a 2 outie rule of 45 possibility. So if we take a look at these 3 rows in the top band and include the cells on either end of row 4, we see that the combined sum of the highlighted cages is 143. That leaves us with an 8 in these 2 cells, and we need to figure out how to make an 8 out of those numbers. A 2-cell 8 sum cannot contain a 4, so we can remove the 4 from these. There is no 6 to pair with a 2, so we can remove the 2. And since we have a 5 in this cell, we know that this one must be a 3. That helps us a couple ways. First of all, we now know that this 3-cell 8 cage is the 1-3-4 combination, which places a 1-4 pair in box 3. We now also know the value of row 1, column 7, as it must be 5 greater than row 4, column 9. We determined that previously by a rule of 45. This now must be 8. We can also come over here to this 19 cage. The only possible combination with a 5 is 5, 6, 8. That leaves us with a 6, 8 pair here. We can remove 9 from this row 3 of box 1. And with a 6, 8 pair here in the box, then row 1, column 3 becomes a 9. Now here in row 1, we can look at this 13 cage in box 3. The 4, 9 and 5, 8 combinations are not possible because the 9 and the 8 look into the 13 cage from the row. This must be a 6, 7 pair. And this 8 and the 6, 7 pair eliminate all but one combination here in the 11 cage, and this must be 2, 9. Now this 2, 9 points into this 17 cage and sets this to be an 8, 9 pair. It also eliminates the possibility of a 2, 4 combination, and this must now be the 1, 5 combination, 6 cage. And if this is the 1, 5, then this must be the 2, 4 combination. So we have box 1 pretty well figured out. The remaining candidates in this 8 cage are 3 and 5, as the 2 and the 7 are already used in the box. And this 3-5 pair is resolved by this 1-5 pair here in box 1. So this is a 3-5 pair. Over here in box 1, we can resolve this 1-5 pair as well. This becomes a 1-5. I think that's all we can do without moving forward here in box number 2. So let's look at box number 2. The remaining candidates in box 2, row 1, are 1, 3, and 5. Now let's look here, still in box 2, in this 11 cage. And the possible combinations are limited because of the 8 and 9 already in the box. And now with the 5 in the 1-3-5 triple, there's only one possible combination, and that is a 4-7 pair, which can be resolved by this 1-4 pair looking left in row 3. That makes this the 7 of the 4-7 pair, and this the 4. Now that helps us resolve this to a 7-3 pair, and I think there's no more cleanup, but we do know now that this 34 cage is limited down to one combination that has to have an 8 and a 9, and it also needs to have a 5. So the final combination for this 7-cell 34 cage is 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9. So we are missing the 2 and the 6. This 6 looking right and this 2 looking left, resolve that into a 6-2 pair. I think we're done here in the top band. So let's move on to the next section of the puzzle, which we'll try and solve. And that will be the leftmost stack. And specifically, let's look at columns 1 and 2. There is a 2-cell outie rule of 45 possibility here in columns 1 and 2. And these are the 2 outie cells. The combined sum of the highlighted cages is 104. That means these 2 cells must sum to 14. The possible combinations in a 14 sum we'll put over here in the calculator. A 2-cell sum of 14. We have a 5, 9, and a 6, 8. Because of this 9, we can remove the 5, 9 combination, and that means that these 2 cells are a 6, 8 pair. And that's going to help us further on in the puzzle, of course. So now the next step is to look down here in box 7. There's another rule of 45 possibility, a 3-cell innie. The combined sum of the highlighted cages down here in box 7 is 37. That leaves 8 to fit into these 3 cells. Let's look at the possible combinations for an 8 sum here in the calculator. If we plug in an 8 sum with 3 cells, we see that there are 2 possible combinations, both of which have a 1. And if we take a look here in columns 1 and 2, we have these 2 5s. That forces the 5 to be in one of these two cells. So I'll put a 5 there. Now, if there's already a 5 in this 3-cell 8 sum, we can eliminate the 1, 3, 4, and we can put a 1, 2 to join the 5, as that is the possible combination. Now let's move up into box 4. This column now is quite limited. There are 3 in this column in box 1, plus the 6-8 pair. That leaves 4 unknown, 3 of which are 1, 2, 5, and we can add 1, 2, 4 into these 2 cells. We know that there is not a 4 down here in this 3-cell 8 sum. The 4 must be here, and we know there's not a 5 here because of the 5 here in the box. So we have all the possible candidates here in column 3. Looking at this 3-cell 19 cage in box 4, it is quite limited for a few reasons. First, there's a 5 in the box. There is also a 4 in this 1, 2, 4, 5 quadruple. The 4 must go here, so it cannot be in the 19 cage. And any possible combination must contain a 6 or an 8. So let's limit these down over here in the combinations tool. We cannot have a 5, we cannot have a 4, and so the possible combinations are 289 and 379, but there's no 6. So we can eliminate the 6 here, and if this is an 8, we can eliminate the 379 combination. So the remaining 2 cells in this 19 cage are a 2-9 pair. That removes the 2 from this 1, 2, 4 set and removes the 1s then down below here in box 7 from this 1, 2, 5 triple, which sets this to be the 1. Now these 2s also look up here into this 2-4 pair up in box 1 in this 6 cage and resolve that to a 2-4. And with setting this 8, we know that now this partner in the 6-8 pair must be the 6. The remaining candidates in box 4 in this 17 cage are a 3, 6, 7 triple. Moving back down to box 7, rather than filling in all of the remaining candidates, I want to look at a few possible placements. I don't want to muddy things up and have to clear them out eventually, but there is some interesting information we can learn. First of all, in this 12 cage, because of the 5 in the column looking down, we know that we can eliminate the 5-7 combination. So this is either 3-9 or 4-8. Now the opposite of the 3-9, 4-8 will end up here in this 25 cage. But I don't want to plug those in, as I've said. one thing we can do is we can ask ourselves, where would we put a 4 or a 9 down here in box 7? Because of the 4 here and these 4s here and the 9 here and the 9s here, we know that the 4 and the 9 must be here in column 1. So if there's the 3-9 pair here, then this must be the 4. Or if there's the 4-8 here, this must be the 9. Now, because there's no 7 in this 12 cage and no 7 anywhere else, we know that the 7s must be here in the 25 cage. So let's go ahead and limit down the combinations of the 25 cage so we've got a better idea of what we have left. We know it must have a 6 and it must have a 7 and either a 4 or a 9. So let's start by eliminating anything that doesn't have a 6. So these do not have 6s. And any of these that do not have a 7, so only one. And this one has a 9 and this one has a 4. So those both still work. And the other values that would fit here with the 7 pair in column 2 would be the 3 and the 8, which would be the partners of the 4 and the 9. All right, so let's move over to the right stack and see what we can learn over here on this side. Looking at this odd-shaped 6-cell 28 cage, we can learn a little bit more about what's going on here in column 7. This 28 cage has an 8 or a 9 in all of the combinations. Now, these two 8s are in both columns of the 28 cage, and that eliminates the possibility of an 8 in this 28 cage. So let's go ahead and remove all of the 8s. That reduces us down to 3 possible combinations, all of which have a 9. Now this 9 here in column 6 forces the 9s to be in column 7. Now that helps us because of our symmetric board and these two columns, columns 8 and 9, we have a symmetric rule of 45 possibility, a 2-column, 2-cell outie, which sums to 100. That leaves 10 in these two cells. A 2-cell 10 sum has 4 possibilities, and all but 1 are eliminated by the 9, the 3, and the 8 in column 7. We can remove the 9 and the 8 and the 3, and we have a 4-6 remaining. This 6 will resolve the 4-6 pair in these two cells to a 6-4. Now that takes us to what I'm going to call the crux of the puzzle. And I wrestled with this one for quite some time before I understood it or felt comfortable demonstrating it. But it's focused on the right stack, predominantly in boxes 6 and 9. If we look at the 5-8 in row 4 and the 5-8 in column 7, these both look into box 6 and force the 5 and the 8 to be somewhere in these 4 cells, in rows 5 and 6 and columns 8 and 9. Now we don't know the other 2 numbers that will be joining the 5 and the 8, nor do we know the exact position of the 5 and the 8, but knowing this will help us in the puzzle. And there are only really 3 possibilities for their locations, and we'll look through those 3 and the impacts of where the 5 and the 8 are going to be. Why? Well, here in box 9, in row 7, column 8, this has quite an impact on this box and where the 5 and the 8 can go in this box as well. We know the 5 and the 8 cannot be down here in column 7, and because of this 3 here and the fact that this is an 8 cage, the 5 and the 8 cannot be here. So either the 5 and the 8 are here, or there's a 5 or an 8 here, or the 5 and the 8 are here, or there's a 5 or an 8 here. So if we can determine which of the 5 and the 8 can go into this row 7, column 8 cell, we can position the 5, 8 down here in box 9. So let's look at the 3 possible scenarios for where the 5, 8 goes in box 6. The first possibility is that the 5 and the 8 are both in the 22 cage. If there were a 5 and an 8 somewhere here, both of them, then we know that there could not be a 5 or an 8 in row 7, column 8. So that's the first scenario. If there were a 5 and an 8 here. The second scenario is if there was a 5 here and an 8 there. So if the 5 is in the 22 cage and the 8 is in this 18 cage in row 5, column 8, the 8 looks at this cell, row 7, column 8, and the 5s are in the same cage. And so in this scenario, with a 5 in the 22 cage and an 8 in the 18 cage, there can also not be a 5 and an 8 in row 7, column 8. And the final scenario is if this was a 5 here in the 18 cage, and there was an 8 in the 22 cage, the 5 sees row 7, column 8, preventing a 5 from being here. The 8s are in this cage as well, preventing an 8 from being here. So in all 3 of these scenarios, with 5s and 8s here in box 6, there can never be a 5 or an 8 in row 7, column 8. What that does is it means the 5 and the 8 must be down here in this 20 cage in box 9. So let's get rid of the 5 and the 8 up here. They were only to help us determine where the 5 and the 8 were down in box 9. Let's delete those and look at the possible combinations that have a 4, 5, and an 8 for a 20 cage. Well, guess what? There's only one. And here it is, this 3, 4, 5, 8. I'm going to get rid of all the other ones. There's a bunch. What is that? 12 of them? So none of the others have a 4, 5, and an 8. So there's some 4s. There's no 5 and an 8 there. Here's another 4. There's a 5 and a 9. There's a 4, but there's no 5. So 3 and 4. This is the only one. So we can put a 3 here. We don't put a 3 here because of this 3 in column 9. So there we go. That wraps up the crux of the puzzle. From there, there's less complex logic. But after all of that, is this really the way the puzzle should be solved? I'm doubting that. I banged my head against the wall, figuratively, for some time on this puzzle to determine how to get past, or how to make progress. And this was the only way that I could find. So if you have a different way, a different solve path, please put it in the comments and let's discuss it. So moving on, let's look in the bottom 2 rows, rows 8 and 9. There is a 1 row, 4 cell outie rule of 45 possibility, where the combined sum of the highlighted cages is 68. That's 23 more than 45. Now, we already have a 6 and a 4 in these, this 4 cell sum that sums to 23. So if we have a 6 and a 4 already, that reduces that number by 10. And so we're trying to find a 13 sum. So I'll put a 13 in the calculator. We already have 2, so there's 2 remaining cells. And we have a 6 and a 4. So the 4-9 combination is not possible. Neither is the 6-7 combination. So all that's left is the 5-8. Now, we can remove the 7 out of this sum, and we can remove the 3. And then this must be a 5 or an 8. Now, we already have a 5 in this box, forced in this 2-5 pair. 5 up here in the column as well. So this must be the 8 of the 5-8 pair. And this is the 5 of the 5-8 pair. And we can pull the 5 out of this cell as well. And that resolves the 3-5-8 to a 5-3-8. So let's do some additional cleanup. Because the 8 is here, that forces the 7 to be here. And if we look up in this column, we can remove the 7 from row 6, column 2. And this 6-8 pair is resolved to an 8-6. Now, with this 6, 7, and 8, we know that the 3, 6, 7, 9 is not a possibility. With the 8 here, its pair is the 4. We can remove the 9 here, and this becomes a 3-9 pair, getting rid of the 3s up here in the 17 cage and forcing this to be the 3. And then we knew that also because of this 6 here. Now, can we do any other cleanup? I don't know that we can. 3, 5, 8, 1, 4, 2, 9, 6, 7. Now let's look over here in box 6 into this 18 cage. We know it must have a 6. So let's eliminate all of the combinations that do not have a 6. And we also know that it cannot have a 3 And we also know, because of the 5 here in the column, that it cannot contain a 5. So this must be a 4-6-8 triple in the 18 cage. And this 8 helps us resolve the resulting 4-8 pair. This becomes a 4, and this one is an 8. Now this 4 helps us clean up this 1-4 pair to a 1-4. And I think that is all we have to clean up. So let's take a puzzle-wide view of where the 8s are. Up here in the top band, we have all 3 8s set. But down here, especially in this middle band, we don't really have a good idea of where the 8s are. But if we do some aggressive highlighting, we can find out a little bit more about where they are. So first off, we have an 8 in row 4 and an 8 in row 5. We can also highlight these 2 boxes. We have an 8 in column 6. And we have 8s in rows 8 and 9 and 8s in boxes 7 and 9. So what that leaves us is this square amidst the highlighting in rows 6 and 7 and columns 4 and 5. So the 8s in the lower 2/3 of the puzzle must go here. Now, we know that 8s cannot be in the same row together. So we cannot have an 8 and 8 here in row 6 or an 8 and 8 in row 7. And we also know that we cannot have 2 8s in a cage. So here in the 24 cage, we cannot have 2 8s, nor can we have 2 8s in the 19 cage. But we do know that an 8 must be in the 24 cage and an 8 must be in the 19 cage. And it will need to be in some, either this scenario where we have an 8 kitty corner this way, or we have 8's kitty corner this way. Bottom line, there's an 8 in the 19 cage, and that limits down what we can, the combinations. If we look up here in the column, there are a 2 and a 6, and that helps us eliminate the possible combinations down to 1 for this 19 cage. So the combination for this 19 cage is 4, 7, and 8. And here in this row, we already have a 4 and an 8. So this must be the 7 of the 4, 7, 8. And this is a 4, 8 pair. Similarly, in this 24 cage, we know it must have an 8. And there's only one of these 3 combinations that has an 8. And this combination, this 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, does not have a 5. We can remove the 5. That puts the 2 here in row 7, column 3, and it puts a 5 here in row 9, column 3. Now, with the 1, 2, 4, there must also be a 3, 6, and an 8. With the 6 here, that forces the 6 into one of these 2 remaining cells, and that makes a 6, 8 pair, and that leaves only one spot to put a 3. So the 3 must go here in row 8, column 4. So that was very productive when we decided, okay, here we go. Where should the 8th go? Now, setting this 3, it helps us over here in box 7 in the 12 cage setting this pair to a 3-9 pair. Can we do any more cleanup with what we've set? I don't believe we can. So the next step is looking here at row 8. It's quite limited. There's only 2 remaining cells, and those cells must be a 1-2 pair. The partner here in this 8 cage for a 1 and a 2 is a 6 and a 7. And this 6, 7 and this 6, 7 make a pair. That'll help us. Now looking at this 5-cell 23 cage in row 9, we have 5 digits in that row. So the remaining possibilities are 1, 2, 6, and 9. It's important to note here that the 6 and the 9 are already in this column number 7. That means this cell here in row 9, column 7 can only be a 1, 2. So with this 1, 2 pair, that forces this to be a 6, 7, 9 triple. And the only place left now in this row for a 5 is here in row 7, column 6. So that's a 5. And these 6s here in box 9, row 7 help resolve this 6, 8 pair. So this is a 6, 8 pair. And this 8 helps us resolve this 4, 8 pair, which becomes an 8, 4 pair. This 6 helps us resolve this 6, 7 pair in the 17 cage of box 4, and it becomes a 6, 7 pair. Let's look now at row 6, column 8 here in box number 6. The remaining candidates are 2, 6, 7, and 9, but there's already a 7 and a 6 here in this row. So it becomes a 2, 9, and we already have another 2, 9 up here in the column 8. So there's a 2, 9 pair in column 8. That means we can take this 9 out of row 7, column 8. Leaves us with a 6, 7 pair in row 7, and that means this here, row 7, column 7, is a 9. That removes the 9s, the additional 9s, from the 28 cage. So let's move from this 28 cage to the box 527 cage. The 6 and the 8 will help us limit the possible combinations of the 27 cage. So let's remove all of the 6s, all of the combinations with a 6, and all the combinations with an 8. That was good for us. That limited us down to one possible combination, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 9. The only number we have not talked about then in box 5 is a 4. So the 4 must go here in this row 6, column 6. And that helps us resolve this 1, 4 pair in box 4 to a 4, 1. So what's left here in row 6? Well, it looks to me like 2, 9, and 5, with the 9 here and the 5 here. This must be a 2. That makes this a 9, and leaves us with a 5 remaining here in row 6, column 9. So the remaining possibilities in box 6 are a 1, 7, So let's put the 1, 7 in. Now this 2 helps us unwind a few things. Now, this becomes a 1, which makes this a 2. If this is a 2, makes this a 6. And that unwinds the 6, 7 pair. This must be a 7. With this 1 down here, this becomes the 7, and this becomes the 1. We look up into this 6, 7 pair. This 7 looks up into the 13 cage, and this becomes a 6, 7. And this 9 also looks up here into box 3, this 11 cage, and resolves this into a 2, 9 pair. And we failed to clean this up with the 2 here in box 28. This becomes a 1. So the middle column still needs a little bit of love, but we are very close to the end. So the remaining candidates in the 23 cage are a 2, 6, 9, and these can be resolved first of all by the 6s in columns 4 and 5, forcing a 6 here into row 9, column 6. And secondly, by this 2 here in column 5, which puts the 9 here. So we end up with a 2, 9, 6 triple to close out this 23 cage. Now if we look up here into box 5, the first row of the 27 cage, row 4, what are the possible candidates here? And that is 1, 2, 7, and 9. The only place for a 7, because of this 7, this 7, and this 7, well, and this 7 as well, is here in row 4, column 6. That's a 7. So we have left a 1, 2, and a 9. This 9 and this 2 look in towards this row, and that means this can only be a 1. So then I have a 2, 9 pair, and this 2 looks up into the 2, 9 pair to make this a 9. So this is actually a 2, which makes this a 9. So now in box 5, the 27 cage, in row 5, we have a 2, 3, 5 remaining. So we have a 2, 3 here. This must be a 5. We have a 2 here. This must be a 3, leaving a 2. And all we have left then is this 1, 3, 5 triple, with this being the 5, and this being the 1, and this being the 3. So that wraps up puzzle 1378. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you for sticking around to the end. Since you are still here, please show your appreciation by leaving a positive or constructive comment, liking this video, and subscribing to the Killer Fun channel. Thanks for giving some love. We will see you next video.